This is For My Sons, a space where we equip men to lead themselves, their families, and their communities with strength and wisdom. I'm your host, Papa O, a father, a husband, a son, and a student of life. Here, we dive into all the topics that shape the development of men. Lessons, stories, and principles you can use to strengthen your family and impact your community. If you're passionate about becoming a better man, building a better family, and leaving a better world, you're in the right place. Let's jump into today's conversation. Welcome back to the For My Sons podcast. And today we're diving into a message, and I know that this season itself has been heavy, but probably what I would consider the most heavy of topics. And hopefully it's hopeful as well. And that is racism and the importance of refusing victimhood while acknowledging reality. Hey, look, man, it's a long title. I know. Obviously, it's racism, okay? Racism and the importance of refusing victimhood while acknowledging reality. Now, let me say it clearly from the start. Racism is real, okay? Prejudice is real. Injustice exists in the UK, in the US, across the world, but we are not defined by what we face. We are defined by how we stand in it. Today, I want to speak to every black man listening, young or old, and remind you, you are not a victim of your history. You are an architect of your legacy. The Yoruba have a saying, "Ti oju banri, enu afiso," which translates as, if the eye see it, the mouth will say it. We don't ignore racism. We don't pretend it isn't there. We name it, we describe it, we challenge it when we must. Let's start with clarity. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, racism is a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capacities, and that racial differences produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. It includes both individual prejudice and the systemic structures that reinforce inequality, from hiring decisions to policing outcomes, from classroom expectations to healthcare disparities. Now, here's something harder to hear. Racism will never truly disappear. It will always be there. Not because we shouldn't fight it, but because it's woven into how humans organize themselves psychologically. Right? There are studies in coalitional psychology, such as those explored by Tooby and Cosmides, that show that the human brain is designed to categorize people into groups quickly. It's a survival instinct, meant to help our ancestors assess allies and threats. The problem is that that same instinct, left unchecked, fuels racial bias even when it's not explicitly taught. Other research in social cognition, like Fisk and Newberg, confirms that humans often rely on stereotypes because the brain seeks shortcuts, a kind of mental efficiency when categorizing others. It's not moral, it's mechanical, but that doesn't make it harmless. And let's be real, racism goes both ways. It is bidirectional. Just because you are black does not mean you are immune from discriminating against someone else because of the color of their skin. The standard must be universal. Character over color. Everyone should be judged not by their surface traits, but by their behavior, values, and how they treat others. It comes back to the golden rule. Treat others the way you want to be treated. If you want fairness, show fairness. If you want dignity, offer dignity. And when you meet people of other races, even those who don't directly impact your dreams, connect with them anyway. Okay? Because no one nation, no one race, no one group can thrive in isolation. We live in an interconnected world. Our economies, technologies, cultures, and futures are all deeply woven together. So the same principles should apply to how we connect as people across difference, not in spite of it. Victimhood isn't just a personal mindset anymore. It's become a public performance. We've lived in a time where being offended is praised more than being responsible, where outrage, whether fake or genuine, is seen as the correct response any time a situation doesn't serve someone's expectations or whenever another person doesn't perfectly align with their worldview. Suddenly there are people being labelled as ists or phobics without pause or nuance. Disagreement becomes oppression, correction becomes violence, and the idea that you might still be responsible for your life even in the face of difficulty? Now that's controversial. Victimhood has been at the forefront of our society for long enough. It has held too many into a mindset that expects praise for perpetual struggle rather than transformation. It's not strength, it's not power. Victimhood is just not a trap, it's a slow road to destruction. Because it always places the power somewhere else, in someone else's hands. It positions you as permanently below, waiting for rescue, validation, or permission. But as an adult, as a man, you are not without power. You have agency. You have decision-making ability. You have influence over your path, your learning, your relationships, and your environment. Whether it's in academia, business, the professional world, or your personal life, including how you choose and maintain your partner, you are called to lead, to act with intention, to move as someone who knows life will not always be fair, but you still have a say in your outcome. The systems are what the systems are. Some were designed with fairness in mind, but many were not. Many were created by people who do not believe in meritocracy. They weren't trying to build a world where the best ideas or the hardest workers rose to the top. No, they built systems to preserve comfort, protect privilege, and maintain control. That's why some doors seem bolted shut before you even approach them. You feel it in the job applications, where your name alone can raise silent red flags. You feel it in the interviews, where you sense you're being assessed not just on what you say, but how comfortable you make them feel. You feel it in the classrooms, where your intelligence might be doubted before you've even spoken. And you feel it in the streets, where your presence can be read as a threat before you've even moved. These systems weren't built for you, so what do? Well, I'll put it to you like this. If your goal is to overhaul the entire system, you have to be prepared to build an entirely new one from the ground up. Now that is possible, but that's also not what most people are trying to do. I'm not, for a start, at least definitely not to that extent anyway, right? What most of us want is this: to not be so disadvantaged by the system we were born into that it completely veers us off from our goals and dreams. We want to have a fair chance to rise. We want to live with dignity. We want to build for ourselves and our families without having to fight for air every step of the way. And that's not only possible, it's happening. The key? Networks. Building a circle of like-minded people regardless of race within the system. That's not a lofty utopian dream, that's real, daily strategic movement. We are more connected than ever before. And when you surround yourself with people who are also moving, building, progressing, people who get it, you start to see change faster. You feel encouraged. You feel empowered. And you realize you are not alone in the system and you do not have to navigate it blindly. Just look at the Windrush generation. They came to post-war Britain to rebuild the country. They were nurses, engineers, cleaners, bus drivers, building lives and contributing to a country that didn't always welcome them, but still relied on them. And even now, across Africa and the Caribbean, men and women are doing the same. Some are starting from behind. Generations behind those who have been here for centuries, but they're building anyway. They're rising anyway. You may not have built the system, but you can still build within it. And that's power. Let's get one thing straight. The goal is to be great. Okay? The goal is to be excellent, to be undeniable. It just so happens that you're black as well. Too often, conversations around race only focus on pain, struggle, or disadvantage. But I'm here to remind you, being black is not the obstacle. I'll say again for the people in the back. Being black is not the obstacle. It's the backdrop. Greatness is the goal. Excellence is the goal. Because when you are excellent, truly excellent, you become undeniable. You might still face resistance, yes. You might still face delay, but you won't be ignored forever. We live in an era where connectivity is powerful. If you are doing something exceptional, someone will notice. You no longer have to beg for a seat at someone else's table. You can build your own, market it yourself, and fill it with people who respect the quality you bring. That wasn't the case 100 years ago, though. Back then, gatekeepers sat at the entrance of every industry: publishing, education, media, finance, medicine. But today, you can publish your own book, launch your own platform, start your own company. If you are brilliant, the world will hear about it, if you keep showing up with consistency and discipline. Being black should never mean you lower your standard. Being black should never mean you expect less or accept less. Anybody who believes that being black is a disadvantage, that excellence is somehow beyond you, should have no place in your circle of influence. Because you are called to rise. Not just to survive a system, not just to push back against racism, but to build a life of substance, power, and legacy, grounded in your identity, but fueled by your standard. Be great, be excellent, let them see your work, and be silenced by it. Okay, so I'm sure some of you are probably wondering at this point in time, yeah, this is all great theory, but how do we apply this? How can we raise our children to see it clearly? Don't worry. That is the next topic. If you're a father, a mentor, an uncle, or an older brother, you, sir, have work to do. Your job isn't just to protect the next generation from harm. It's to equip them, to prepare their minds, their posture, and their speech for the world they are walking into. Racism is real, but so is preparation. So is strategy. So is wisdom. And the earlier you start, the stronger they stand. So our job, especially as black men raising or mentoring the next generation, is to teach them how to recognize both forms of racism so that they are not caught unaware and unprepared. These aren't always shouted. Sometimes they're whispered or implied. But make no mistake, both overt and subtle racism are real. Those are the two types of racism, by the way. Yeah? I'll say it again. Both overt and subtle racism are real. Let me give you an example, or let me tell you a bit about subtle racism. Subtle racism is quieter, but just as damaging. It can look like this. A backhanded compliment about your appearance or speech. Oh, you're really well spoken. As opposed to who? Huh? Being followed in a shop without cause. People assuming you're less intelligent, less capable, or out of place. Being the only one in rooms where representation should exist. Yeah, that's subtle, right? I'm sure that there have been many examples that you've come across in your lifetime, which sometimes you thought about and gone, was that racism? Was that racism? Nah, it couldn't be me. A lot of the time, it's a benefit of a doubt type situation, right? But those are examples of subtle racism. Now, overt racism is the most visible, right? This is the kind that you normally see in some Hollywood film where you're just like, bruv, how often does this actually happen in real life? It does, but not to the extent that the films always try and point it out to be, right? But I'll give you some examples anyway, right? Racial slurs. Of course, that's overt, right? Hate speech. Now, I'm going to premise that when I'm talking about hate speech in the context of racism, it's when someone uses words, spoken, written, or online, to attack or incite hostility against a person or group because of their race. It's not just offensive, it's meant to degrade, provoke, or intimidate based on skin color or ethnic background. Because I understand that when people are talking about hate speech, sometimes it blurs the lines. Well, a lot of people blur the lines on what hate speech is. So I thought I'd give it to you in the context of racism. Okay? Violence motivated by race. Yeah? Public discrimination or exclusion based explicitly on race. Those are examples of overt racism. Racism comes in different forms, and both need to be recognized for what they are. This isn't about filling young minds with bitterness. It's about giving them the language and clarity to understand the world without letting that understanding crush their confidence. So let's talk about how we do that. Yeah? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you two scenarios, right? Scenario one will be what I would consider to be a proactive conversation or proactive, preparation mode, right? Proactive conversations at home. And scenario two will be responding when racism happens outside the home. Okay? So for scenario one, let's say you're having dinner, just you and your son, right? You, your wife, and your son. And you bring up a story, maybe something from your own past. For example, there was a time in school when I answered every question in class and the teacher still told me to sit back down and be quiet, right? Remember, you're not venting, you're teaching. And in that story, or after that story, you then ask your son, if someone underestimates you, how do you respond? Now, the reason why I'm phrasing the question like that is because sometimes teachers can be douches. Okay? That doesn't mean they're racist. How I do my assessment with my children is I will first explore all other options first. And if all I'm left with is, well, it has to be down to the color of skin, then at least I've tried to go through every other avenue first, because not all disparity against you, not all difficulties against you, not all challenges against you are because you're black. Okay? I just want to make that very clear. Now, after you've asked this question about being underestimated and how your son would respond, you've now opened the door. You're equipping them to recognize, because in that example I just gave, in that story I just gave, that was subtle racism. Yeah? Not just slurs or violence, but the quiet ways it shows up in school, sport, or social settings. And more importantly, you're rehearsing strength, calm, awareness, dignity, power without panic. That's proactive fathering. And that's how you raise your children to see clearly, right? So again, that is scenario one, right? And I'll recant it again for you, just so that, you have a better understanding. You sit down with your son. Could be at any time. It could be dinner, right? Sometimes it could be a case of, you're watching TV and you want to have some discussions with your son, and you say, okay, you give like a story as to a time that you experienced that. So, there was a time at school when I answered every question in class correctly, and the teacher still told me to sit down at the back and be quiet, as if I was being punished. Right? Son, if someone underestimates you, how would you respond? Yeah? That's scenario one. Scenario two, which is responding when racism happens outside of the home. Right? I want you to imagine your child comes home and says, Dad, someone at school made a joke about my skin. This is the moment. It's easy to react in anger, and anger is natural. But what your child needs isn't rage. It's reassurance, strategy, and powerful reflection. You sit them down and say, well, what they said was wrong and has nothing to do with your worth. So let's talk about how to respond in a way that makes you stronger. Then you walk through the options. You address it directly and calmly, if it feels safe. You report it to someone in authority. You document it if needed. And most importantly, you tell your son Don't let it shape your view of yourself. You affirm their value. You guide their next step, and you help them see this is not about hiding from reality. This is about standing in it, tall, wise, and ready. Because when your son comes home, the first thing they're going to be doing is that they're definitely going to be challenging you on their own worth. And for anybody that this isn't clear to, when someone is being racist to you, it is a direct reflection of how mentally poor they are in comparison to you. It is not on you. It is not on your worth. It is a lack of theirs on their side. Okay? Your job isn't to make the world soft for your children. It is to make your children strong, loving, and wise enough to handle a world that won't always be fair. You do that by being the example, by talking about the hard things early, turning that pain into power, and by raising sons who will stand taller than the ones who tried to make them small. So I want this to land very clearly in my closing thoughts. Racism is real. Prejudice exists. Bias is baked into many corners of life, from schools to boardrooms, from headlines to hidden policies. But here's what we must never forget. That reality does not remove your responsibility. It does not remove your agency. It does not remove your power to choose how you will respond and who you will become. Yes, you may be mistreated. Yes, you may be misunderstood. But your response, your standard, your legacy, that's on you. We live in a time where victimhood is praised, where people are rewarded for shouting about their pain louder than anybody else. But pain without purpose is poison. And bitterness without direction is bondage. You are not here to stay stuck. You are not here to make struggle your identity. You are here to rise, to move through hardship with wisdom, and to refuse to let racism chain your mind or your momentum. Because others are watching. Your sons, your brothers, your circle, even those you don't know, are paying attention. And how you handle injustice can either set them free or keep them bound. So stand tall, act wisely, lead with conviction. And most of all, live as proof that being black is never a limitation and that greatness is always a choice. Until next time. Thank you for joining me today on For My Sons. I hope today's message challenged you, encouraged you, or gave you something worth passing down. If you found value in this episode, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a new letter, a new lesson, or a new legacy moment. Until next time, be a communications CEO. Communicate clearly, communicate early, and communicate often. This is Papa O, and I am out.